the Pythagorean Theorem. So there was a mathematician named Pythagoras, and he came up with the theorem that we now name for him. Now, the Pythagorean Theorem deals with right triangles. So it's very, very important that you see the right triangle marking to note this is a 90-degree angle. That is important dealing with the Pythagorean Theorem. Now, when we have a right triangle, I like to say when you look at that right triangle marker, the two sides that it intersects are the legs of the triangle. The other side, which is the longest side of the triangle, is what we call the hypotenuse. Now, with this, we often will say the legs are A and B, and those are interchangeable. It doesn't matter which leg is A, which leg is B. They're just A and B are the legs. And the hypotenuse is known as C. So the Pythagorean theorem tells us that the sum of the squares of the legs equals the square of the hypotenuse. So A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And this allows us to find a missing side of a right triangle. So this here is the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, let's play. Oh, I just did that. Okay, so use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing length. Now, if you are a visual learner like me, I often will look at a picture and say, okay, here's my right angle, and I make it bigger. So I can see that these are the two sides that are my legs. So one of these is A, one of them is B. And again, it does not matter which. So knowing that the Pythagorean theorem is A squared plus B squared equals C squared, I can now substitute in what I know to find my missing piece. So I have A is 6. So 6 squared plus B is 8, so 8 squared. So 6 squared plus 8 squared equals the unknown value of C squared. And now we do our order of operations. So I'm going to simplify the exponent first. So 6 squared is 36 plus 8 squared is 64 equals my unknown C squared. 36 plus 64 is 100. Equals C squared. Now, to get C by itself, I need to unsquare it. Well, the opposite of squaring something is to take the square root. So I take the square root. Now, technically, the square root of 100 is either 10 or negative 10. But we are talking about a figure, the side, the length of a triangle. And it is impossible to have a side of a figure that is a negative length. It just cannot happen. So when we are talking about the length of a side of a triangle, it has to be positive. So we have found by taking the square root of both sides that our value of C is 10. So the length of the hypotenuse of this particular right triangle is 10 feet. Now, one thing that I want to point out is don't lose your common sense. So when you're looking at a right triangle, you know that the hypotenuse is the longest side. So after you finish and you say, okay, I found that my hypotenuse is 10. Is that longer than both of my legs? In this case, yes, so it makes sense. If you happen to put a number in the wrong place, right, mistakes happen and that's fine, just make sure you check that. If I would have found my hypotenuse to be 4, I would have known that was wrong because it needs to be longer than both of my legs. So just don't forget to kind of check that. All right, so let's use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing length. So you'll notice, again, I find my right angle. So these two sides are my legs. I have B, so this is A. Now, thinking through with that common sense piece, this longest side is my hypotenuse. That means I know my value of B is going to be smaller than 17. So when I finish, my answer needs to be smaller than 17. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Let's substitute in what we know. A is 8. So 8 squared, I don't know B, so I just keep that B squared, equals 17 squared. Now we simplify. So let's square the numbers we have. 8 squared is 64. Again, I don't know B, so I keep B squared. 17 squared is 289. Now, my goal is to get b by itself. So our next step is to subtract 64 from both sides. We need to isolate the variable. So I get b squared equals 225. Now to unsquare it, this is where I will take the square root of both sides. We're finding the length of a side, so it's going to be positive, and the square root of 225 is 15. So it is smaller than 17, perfect, and it fits. So I would have my value of b is 15 inches. One thing I forgot to say before on the last one, so we would have the sides 8, 15, and 17, and this is called a Pythagorean triple because they make up the sides of a right triangle, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's just a little extra nugget in case you want to get a question right on Jeopardy sometime. So Pythagorean triple, dealing with the Pythagorean theorem, find the missing side of a right triangle.